Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning into today's Industry Insights webinar on getting started with Phase 2 in Office 365. My name is Allison Kim, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator here at Latera. Before we dive into today's topic, I'd like to quickly inform everyone that today's session will be recorded. So whether you can't stay for the entire session, would like to reference back to the included resource links, or would like to share today's topic with your colleagues, we will email today's webinar within the next day. And finally, there will be time for a live Q&A session. If you have any questions, please submit them into the chat panel and we will get to them at the end. With that said, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, industry expert Sherry Capel, document lifecycle evangelist here at Latera. I won't take up any more time, so Sherry, it's all yours.
Thank you, Allison. You know, I think that it's worthwhile for us to certainly explain why we're talking about this phase 2 deployment when likely so many of you are, as the analogy goes, carrying the refrigerator up the stairs, still moving into this new platform. And so what I wanted to share is a few of the things that you can look ahead for and anticipate after completing your deployments and rollouts, and certainly a checklist of how we can ready ourselves for phase 2. It's really never too early to think about that next phase. So in our session today, we are going to share with you, essentially hot off the press, a number of trends across the legal community as it relates to Office 365. And we have some fantastic data points to articulate about that. We're also going to describe the typical phases and what everyone is doing in them, the goals and the outcomes of them. And then we want to talk a little bit about how change has changed and give you a great checklist for ways to think about embarking on the phases to come. As usual, we have some great resources, and as Allison said, live Q&A at the end. So first of all, let's peel away the Office 365 trends. And indeed, the statistics wouldn't really be appropriate unless what we had was a focus on legal. And lucky for us and our impeccable timing, the ILTA 2009 tech survey was just released. I've provided you with the link there, and you can, download it and look at all. I think it's 384 pages, I believe. What I want to tell you about that survey is that there were 537 firms that responded. 2/3 of those responding firms had 150 lawyers or less. But there's some surprising detail when we start to peel away, what are the stats about utilization of Office 365 from that survey. So all those firms that were that responded, again, essentially the 537 firms, there are 46% of us already using Office 365. And when you think about this, this is a survey that was taken several months back, certainly. The data collated several months back. And so I would imagine that number has inched up. Have we hit our tipping point? I'm not sure. But I was really thrilled to see just how many of the firms have taken up Office 365. Now, meanwhile, back out in the grander world, it was released at the end of October, insight that Office 365 had hit 200 million monthly active users. So we are in a really big club, as it were. The interesting note about that is that just at the end of April of last year, we were at 180 million. So they're going at a very fine clip. And again, I feel like we in legal are tracking certainly indeed the same in a same pace, whether that happens to be our Office desktop applications or even some of the other services. And that's some of the exciting news I have to share today. So before we embark on some of the details about the what are we implementing and what specifically defines a phase one or a phase two, we need to talk just a little bit about change. Now, this very, very colorful image is for a reason. And that is because one of my colleagues, Kurt Meltzer, has been inducted into the College of Law Practice. And every year they have this annual conference. And as you can imagine, what is top of mind as folks are learning about the trends in law practice management? That conference, it's called the Futures Conference, was opened with a presentation by a gentleman whose name is Chris Arendt. He is the head of the U.S. Legal Shared Services for, of all things, the Warner Music Group based in Nashville. So one of the things that he did in his talk as he opened up this conversation is he talked about the transformation of the music industry, about how they had to go from physical sales to a sort of digital streaming approach. And while that required a transformation, certainly, of their technology, it equally required a transformation in the way that they ran their business. I feel very strongly that his analogy, it's just so perfect. He is their chief legal officer, so he spoke about how he too saw a very similar transformation that's occurring in our legal community. That digital transformation is on the top of mind of all of our law firm leadership. Remember, many of our law firm leaders started when this industry was driven by the sellers, aka the law firms. But today, the buyers are now, the corporate legal departments are actually dictating the terms of the business relationship. They're placing demands on our firms to do more with less, and it's just passing along what their shareholders are asking of them. So those kinds of, alternate fee arrangements, increased reliance on that, increased project management around that, increased delivery services, all of these things are very much like that transformation in the music industry, where the consumers wanted to pull the information versus having the music industry push it out to them in a physical form. So how does this relate? And I love this book. This book is a book that was published back in, I think, 1988, I think. And it's called The Design of Everyday Things. And the analogy of this became so apparent to me as I putting together our session today. The book is about this gentleman, Don Norman, who was the author. He had worked out of the U.S. for about a year on some endeavor or project, and he continuously was frustrated by not being able to operate the light switches or the clock radio or anything that was in his room. And so he got so frustrated by it, he started noticing everywhere around him the everyday things that had been poorly designed. And so it earned him a kind of moniker. You all have, I am sure, encountered the Norman door. You may have multiple of them, on the floor you're working on right now. The Norman door is the door that, well, let's say you pull it and you're really supposed to push it. Essentially, you may run flat-faced into it. And if you all get a chance after this webinar, check out the YouTube video on the Norman door. I will forewarn you, there's a little bit of sweariness in it, but it adds to the character of the little film. And it's Don Norman telling how he wrote the book and what it means to design things that do not frustrate people, what it means to design things that afford signals and feedback and how those things help us all. But most importantly, what he tells us in the video and in this amazing book is how to iterate through design, how you continuously improve in tiny increments so that one day will there be no longer any Norman doors. I'm not sure. They are quite everywhere. But we have basically a benefit in that our equivalent of doors is software and content. And so those digital things are a lot easier to change than indeed the hardware that you see there. One comment that Don makes is that, if you do this design right, you don't even need any labels. You should be able to tell just by pulling it, that's a handle, you pull it, or that flat placard, you push it. You don't even need any labels. And that's how intuitive design is done, whether it's Door or our software or Office 365. And I want you to keep that thought in your mind as we go forward here. So first of all, what exactly is going on, shall we say right now, or what is the precursor to a phase 2 implementation of Office 365? Well, largely, it's us pushing out the technology. What we're doing right now is we are essentially recrafting, almost redrafting entirely in some cases, our infrastructure and or the way that we manage email, for example, whether we're putting in Exchange Online, whether that's going on in, kind of a parallel path to all of us building on the desktop. We're putting in Windows 10, where we're creating this pipeline of methods for getting updates of it, as well as Office 365 Pro Plus on our desktop. We might even be changing to 64-bit Office, which then requires us to upgrade all of our add-ins, as well as, of course, whether 32-bit or 64-bit. It also is requiring us, based on just the last time we tried to, we did this big push of major technology, we also have to upgrade the DMS maybe to a later version. We do the front end and the back end, and we coordinate all of this so that what we do is we come out with a rollout that is this entire big, huge change delivered almost like Thanksgiving dinner, where you have 40 people there and you need to serve the dinner all at once. Now, what I am equally pleased to report to you from the ILTA 2019 Tech Survey, on page 123, they dive into the details about those 46% of the respondents. What other Office services, by size and the number of lawyers, what percentage of each grouping is using Office 365? And if you take a look, it pretty much tracks kind of evenly. But if you look at the firms that were responding, 23% of those firms that were over 700 lawyers, even they are currently working with Office 365 and its applications and services. So again, we're seeing this kind of momentum, and it's just really exciting to see. Now, what happens though, now that we've gotten ourselves this far, and again, maybe you're going to be getting this done within the next 5 months, the next 3 months, but the point is, I want you all to start thinking about phase 2. Once we get that big push of technology done, guess what happens? What happens is our users start to pull the enhancements. And so phase 2, and by the way, phase 2 could have, phase 2.1.3.2.4, it would have all these different sorts of perhaps offshoots. But phase 2, which will take us, if you will, through the next year, is going to put emphasis on the fact that now we have this kind of highway of getting updated features out to our users, identifying a cadence in which we're going to do that, and then forming internal teamwork kinds of projects and tasks that allow us to leverage the rest of Office 365. So in phase 2, what we need to be ready to do is to clarify for our users, what is our tech cadence? Every 6 months, we're going to give you new changes, or maybe it's going to be, less frequently. It also allows us to now get back to the users in front of them, learn, as Don Norman did, learn how they use it and iterate through some of the finessing we know we're going to want to do. But our emphasis is entirely going to be on the tiny noticeable things, improving the experience and improving the processes of our business. And I think the really nice thing that we are seeing, and this in terms of the folks that I've worked with, where they've already started to leverage some of those additional capabilities, those additional services, they are absolutely confirming that the users are pulling these technologies. It's not an adoption that folks have to push. Now, that of course means, we need to support them and we need to understand. So we have to manage the adoption, and equally, let's try to put some, cadence around it, that allows us to learn from it and share it so that we can continue to drive process efficiencies. But I do like that whole push and pull thing because, again, I think that's what happens in phase 2. We push this big, desktop enhancement out, but then the users begin to pull the services into their work. So this is perhaps my most, I'm so thrilled by this particular slide. So once again, if we took the 45% of the firms that are on Office 365 at the time they responded to that survey, these are the services, the hosted services of 365 they're already utilizing. So as I said, we got our Exchange Online. That enables a tremendous amount of capability for our users. 61% of them are using OneDrive in some fashion or another. 50% of them have embarked on Microsoft Teams or SharePoint Online or Outlook web access. So again, if you take a look down this survey, you see all of the additional services that firms are getting benefit from in their phase. Well, frankly, as their phase 1 completed, phase 2 began by the users and perhaps the IT team supporting them, the adoption team supporting them, leveraging these capabilities for a good purpose. Now, there is one thing that I wanted to point out. Dead center of the screen, there is a mention of flow. And I just want to make sure that you all know that flow is no longer called flow. Flow has been renamed to Power Automate. And so just please kind of know that. You'll find these details and all of the breakdown of it on pages 124 to 126 in that survey. I think that this gentleman, a Microsoft MVP, said this best. He said, when we get to this stage, again, phase 2, we have to recognize that adopting Office 365 isn't going to happen automatically like perhaps our updates might or other automation that we have employed. It's not going to happen automatically after deployment, but it's going to happen manually as the users, change their behaviors and start to leverage this to, make work a lot simpler and certainly, again, take the rough edges out of the experience that they've presently had on our current desktop or our legacy desktop now. So what I did was I went ahead and put together a bit of a checklist for you. It's kind of a two-phase approach here, and you iterate on it, just like Don Norman and his doors. First, what you need to do is to go out amongst your organization and identify who your champions are. You can do this, shall we say, the old-fashioned way by visiting them, calling them. That's very good. But one of the tools you also have at your disposal are the usage statistics inside of the Office 365 Admin Center. You can see who are using those additional services and basically connect the dots on, what sorts of tools they're finding useful in business terms. Next, please identify your Norman doors, all those things that are frustrating people, all those workflows that are challenged and protracted because you're working across disparate systems. Find the folks who have to do cross-functional tasks because, once again, those systems don't necessarily talk to one another. And as a consequence, sadly, neither do the people. And so seek out those kinds of tasks that need to take place. Identify an early adopter group. Again, a couple of tools, one I mentioned. Another would be just setting up a kind of team site and maybe inviting those people that to participate. Build a team site and an early adopter group around your training folks or professional technology development folks, because those people can actually learn the technology while they're then going to share and adopt it. And then finally, one thing I want to make sure, please, don't forget to document the current state. So if you have a particular process that you want to improve, please document what are the current steps and what is the current state, because once you improve that process, you need to kind of have a baseline to say, wow, we took this process and we improved it by 15%. we improved it by 5%. Even taking and making small incremental changes is the goal, but make sure you document the current state so you have a baseline. And then your action plan. The first thing I think is that's important, particularly as you come out of the role of your Windows desktop and your Office 365 desktop apps, is please redevelop the mastery for your applications group and for IT. At the end of the presentation, I have links to some courses that are free on edX. One to earn an adoption specialist certification, another to earn, goodness, it's probably 10 hours of training for free on configuring Office 365. Make sure you establish that Champions team site. That might be where you broadcast constant updates. One of the partners in the community that I've been working with on our sessions around ILTACon and such built a little script that says every time a new sort of update gets notified to the admin center, what happens is it routes them to a specific person who then assigns the task of researching it. Will it be useful to us in Planner? So they're literally using all of these tools to enable the furtherance of this platform. Be sure to enlist a partner, particularly around security, compliance, governance, managing all of the reporting that is available to you, because you're going to want and need these things. And then finally, once you get yourself down a little bit of a path and people have crafted and configured some things with these tools, let them pull the tools, but then let them also share the successes by testing it out in a targeted channel where they're isolated and, in fact, where they feel rather special. Always remember through the whole thing, as the adoption site tells us, that change is really a human process. It doesn't have anything to do with technology other than the technology is the tool. We really want to, acknowledge that adoption is the change of behavior, the change in the way we work, and the improvement of efficiency and, frankly, of just an improved experience that we get out of that. So what exactly is next? Well, first of all, also in this same week, very timely we planned this, there was a big, and I think it's still going on today, the Microsoft Ignite conference. There are so many new features coming in Teams. Check out these links. For those of you who were on the fence about OneNote 2016 versus OneNote app in Windows 10, Microsoft went ahead and extended its life by another 2 years, and that supportability beyond that, another 2 beyond that. So that's an interesting announcement. And then they renamed that whole Power Apps to a platform, separated it now as 2 words, and they renamed Flow as Power Automate. So check all that stuff out, really exciting stuff. Make sure that you register for our upcoming webinars. We'll continue to keep you posted on the things that we learn about Office 365, but also about the enhancements of our product to fold around that new platform and context. So with that, Allison, I think we're ready for questions.
Yep. So our first question is, so you mentioned there's a lot of changes happening with Office 365. How are vendors, in this case Latera, keeping up with the updates?
An exceptional question. Honestly, with changes that are coming, even on that sort of monthly cycle, the way that vendors have to keep up, honestly, is they have to set themselves up to be far more proactive, and they equally have to set themselves up with the assets from Microsoft that enable them to have shall we say, a backbone into the Microsoft group to get questions answered. So one of my best pieces of recommendation here about polling your partner and how they keep up with this is, do they subscribe to Microsoft Premium support? Because if they do, they're going to get an answer and they're going to know when they get the answer. However, if you don't have premium support as a vendor, it's very difficult. You get thrown into the queue with everyone else. We at Latera specifically, there are many of us, including many on our QA teams, who stay on that monthly channel. And because we do that, we're able, over every sort of issuance of updates, we're able to keep pace with finding issues and continuously QAing the applications. The other thing I'll mention is that we have set ourselves up for all of our applications to be on a quarterly cadence with the mind's eye that should something be introduced, we always have a release upcoming in which we can tackle it. So that's how we deal with it, Allison.
Awesome. And then for users, how can they keep up to date with all the different updates that are coming up from Office 365?
Yeah, again, it's a very similar sort of guidance. Number one, you really want to work within a team and sort of distribute maybe the focus of what insights you all are going to gather and lessons you're going to learn. One of the things that I've done in the resources section of our slide deck there, by the way, is the edX courses, the adoption hub for teams, the service adoption specialist certifications. One of the things that we did as part of our Office 365 series was we created a OneNote notebook that had notes and links and, you know, all of the places you can go for new information. And in those links, we point you to the roadmap, which is a great way to see kind of generally what's coming. Another place, absolutely, the user voice sites, because they tell you what's in development, what's being considered, so you get really great insight. And then, of course, your Office 365 Admin Center gets messages when those updates come out. And it's really important to get tapped into that so that what you too can do is to keep pace and be informed.
Wonderful. Those are all the questions that we have for today's session. Before we sign off, I just want to remind everyone that, as Sherry mentioned in the deck, we will send out this recording as well as the PDF handout so you can have access to all the links and the resources. And if you want to see what other webinars we've done in the past, as well as register for our upcoming webinars, you can visit latera.com/webinars. All right, thank you, Sherry, for presenting today's session, and thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Yes, thank you. Have a great afternoon, everyone.